Hello everyone, Shannon Flummerfeld here for Flip Schools. Hey, welcome to the Understanding Instruction series. This is the last of 5 in this series that help you to understand as a faculty member a few things about instruction. And we're going to end this with presenting to you a value stream map tool and show you how you can use it to better understand instruction. So as a faculty member, especially if you're involved in flipping your classroom or as part of an initiative to flip your school, there's going to be a lot of instructional changes and issues that are going to come forward. And a value stream map is a really nice way to kind of sort everything out and figure out exactly what needs to be done, so you don't get confused or that there's not any misunderstandings about what's happening. So what is a value stream map? Well, this is going to be a tool I'm going to show you here, but it takes place in 3 stages, and it's basically a visual management tool, a visual diagram. And what it does is it shows what the current state is, what the improvement state is, and what the future state is of a given process. It does it by breaking that process down into steps, and that each step has metrics that are assigned to it that would measure what matters to the stakeholder who's being served. Now, in this series of videos, there's an explanation of metrics, of value and waste, of stakeholders and mission. So if some of this seems a little technical, you could maybe take a couple minutes and go back and listen to those videos. But what we're going to do here is take a look at a typical traditional instructional delivery approach. And in this example, we're going to identify the student as the critical stakeholder of instructional delivery, which means that we need to place metrics on processes that occur in this instructional delivery process that matter to the student. And so in this case, we've selected whether or not active learning is happening and opportunities for students to self-direct. And that's because that's what students value here in this classroom experience. So now, as a classroom teacher, you can begin to examine what's happening in terms of instructional delivery. A value stream map is a nice tool. You can use it collectively with colleagues within a department or a grade level or across the school or on any of the instructional committees you might be working on. And this value stream map is set up again in 3 stages. Here's the current state. Here's what you do first of all is figure out what process it is that you want to look at for improvement. And this is seems kind of simple, but a lot of times people are very satisfied with the way things are and they don't want anything to change. So it's important to understand that, maybe I can improve something here, or maybe as a department or as a school, we can improve some part of instruction. And so that needs to happen first. Then once the process is identified, the next thing is to figure out who is the critical stakeholder in that process. And then the third thing is to figure out what really matters to that critical stakeholder, and those will become the metrics of value within that process. Another step that's important to do in value stream mapping is to also figure out some of the other actors who are involved with the particular process at hand. So we might have someone who's a process owner. In this case, for the delivery of instruction, typically we'd consider a teacher a process owner. It's not unlikely, though, that a student could be a process owner of their own learning as well. And then there are suppliers, administrators who have expectations, boards of education, school improvement teams, and so on, who sort of add some layers of information and expectation to the process. So those can be recognized also. Once we have that all figured out, we actually walk step by step through the process and give a metric for each step. So let me show an example here of a value stream map in the current state. We're looking here at typical instructional delivery, and we're saying the critical stakeholder is the student. You'll notice the student's been identified with a blue box here with kind of a crown, if you will, on the box. And we're also saying that the process owner is the teacher, which again, a very important actor, and again is identified with a crown, sort of a crooked crown there. What we're going to do now is say, okay, for the student, what are metrics that matter in instructional delivery? We have 2. We're looking at active learning as a number 1 metric, and we're going to look at that as high, medium, and low. And then self-directedness as a number 2 metric. Again, we'll categorize those as high, medium, low. Now, this is going to flow from left to right, as you notice, but it doesn't have to. It's just the way a lot of value stream maps are set up. So what we do now is we walk in the shoes of the student. What does the student experience at each part of instructional delivery? And so here's what happens. We see that the teacher, as the process owner in the first step, plans the lesson. What does that do for active learning and self-directedness? Our 2 metrics, well, those rank pretty low. The next thing that happens is the teacher delivers the lecture and the learning activities. Well, depending on how the learning activities are structured, we might get into some active learning there. But still, overall, it's kind of a medium ranking, and then the self-directedness is low. Teacher assigns the homework as the next step in the instructional delivery. In terms of active learning, very low for students, and we're going to hit a metric of medium in terms of self-directedness. The student does have to take responsibility for doing the homework, getting in a study group if they need to, looking up answers and asking people for help if they need it, and so on. And then in the end, the teacher assesses the student. Again, we have active learning for the student is low, but self-directedness is about medium. So let's just say that that's the current state value stream map. Again, metrics are based on what's important to the student. You're walking in the shoes of that critical stakeholder, applying the metrics all along the way to understand the process. One thing important that I'd like to mention about this is that as we lay these processes out and we're looking to see where points of improvement may happen in the process, we do not pick on people. We don't isolate teachers. We don't isolate students. We don't isolate people. The focus here is on understanding in the process what could be improved, and that people will collaborate and work together in problem solving to do that. Okay, now we're ready that we have the current state. We're ready to move into a value stream map for the improvement state. There's a few steps to go through. First of all, we need to check for the roles of the critical stakeholder and process owner. What roles are they playing? Could we change things up? Is the critical stakeholder fulfilling the right kind of role, the process owner, and so on? The next thing is that we're looking at those process boxes. What's happening? Does it flow together? Does it make sense? And also, what about the metrics on those process boxes? We check those for value. Then once we do that, we're going to use a learning conversation. Again, this isn't about picking on people, blaming anyone. We're trying to use a learning conversation, solve a problem, and we're going to look at the strengths and value and weakness and waste and so on in the process as the value stream map highlights, and then figure out what points of improvement do we need. So now we move into looking at the current state and figuring out what are the points of improvement. So as we look at this particular value stream map, there are a couple things that just pop off the page. And what we do is we put this starburst here, and this is something called a Kaizen burst. And what it is it just says like, wow, this is sort of popping off the page. And there's a couple of things as this faculty member, as this teacher's looking at instructional delivery, maybe conferring with some colleagues and so on. First of all, the teacher role is dominating the process. So the process owner dominates the process as opposed to the critical stakeholder. So that's one thing that's obvious here. We're also seeing that overall there's relatively poor metrics that the student is experiencing. Another one of our points of learning here, points of improvement, is that we see student accountability is really low. And also if we actually look at what's happening in those process boxes, some of the activities are pretty boring from the viewpoint of the critical stakeholder, the student. So what can we do to change this up? Well, these are all of our points of improvement. So now we can move to creating a future state map. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we want to try to incorporate these points of improvement. We want to change roles as we need to, fix the flow, change the value proposition, whatever we need to do, create a new future state map. And then we also need to talk about, again, not blaming people. We're trying to improve processes. So we use learning conversations. We try to figure out how are we going to make this happen, deploy this and make this real. Once we try it, also it's important to realize that we're going to have to look at this again. If we come up with an improvement solution here in a future state map, it's not going to be perfect. We have to be willing to assess it, put it on a timeline. When are we going to check to see how this is working out, conduct a second stage of improvement, and, go through this again until we really feel like we've got things just very, very, very refined to best practice. So in this case, here's our future state map. Again, we're going to try this and come back and, do an improvement, a new future state map at some point. But here's what we've decided is that what we're going to do is we're going to sort of change the roles around here a little bit. And the student, again, has the same metrics, active learning and self-directedness, metric 1 and 2. And the teacher and student are now going to engage in different kinds of things. And so what's going to happen here is that we're going to have the teacher play the role of facilitator. In the first process box on the left, we're going to see that the student is actually going to create some lesson plans that they will follow for the week. And the teacher is going to facilitate this process in terms of active learning, very high, self-directedness, very high. Okay, now we move to another issue here, another part of the process. What we're having happen is that we're using a flipped classroom model. The teacher is now delivering the lecture before class via screencast technology. And now when the student's in class, they're going to select a learning activity. And also there's going to be some peer coaching and peer teaching going on in the classroom. So again, the role of the teacher, the role of the student's changing, but what's happening to the metrics here? We're seeing that active learning and self-directedness is also high. Now what happens is that based on what happened in that class period, with the teacher facilitating student learning and facilitating peer teaching, now what's going to happen is the student is going to self-select homework with teacher approval. And there's going to be arrangements, if they're needed, for peer tutoring that happens. Again, the role is very different here, where the student is very active in learning and self-directing. And then the last step is now the teacher is going to look and do assessment, looking at student mastery, and the student is also going to perform some self-assessment. So those two together create the assessment function. Again, very high on active learning for the student and high on self-directedness. Well, this may seem like somewhat of a startling example as to how a value stream map can be used to understand instruction, but there are so many options, so many things that can be done. And if you're willing to just take a look at it, current state, where are improvements, and what can we do in the future, the next thing would be to discuss how do we make this happen? How do I make this happen in my classroom and within my department, within my school? And again, use learning conversations to do that. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this short video, and hopefully it'll help you as you engage in the Flip Classroom. If you want more information, you can go to the Flip Institute website at theflipinstitute.com. Hey, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the video.